The blood-red sun dipped below the rugged horizon of Willow Creek, Arizona Territory, 1878, as Zara Thomas rode into town with a bounty on her head and a secret in her heart. The dust of the long trail clung to her riding skirt, the weight of the revolver at her hip familiar as her own heartbeat. She had nowhere left to run, and the last thing she expected to find in this God-forsaken town was redemption, much less love. Isaac Armstrong leaned against the weathered post outside the saloon, watching the lone rider approach with interest that grew as he realized the stranger was a woman, something rare enough in these parts, especially one traveling alone. His badge caught the last crimson rays of sunlight, Deputy Marshal's star polished despite the grime that seemed to permeate everything in Willow Creek. "Madam," he said, tipping his hat as she dismounted in front of the town's only hotel. "Welcome to Willow Creek." Zara's emerald eyes flicked to the badge, then back to his face, handsome despite the thin scar that ran along his jawline. "Thank you, Deputy," she said, her voice carrying a hint of the East, despite her obvious effort to hide it. "I don't intend to cause any trouble." "Didn't say you would," Isaac replied, something in her demeanor giving him pause. He'd been a lawman long enough to recognize when someone was running from something. "Just doing my duty welcoming visitors." "Of course." She gathered her saddlebags, avoiding his gaze. "Is there somewhere I can stable my horse for the night?" "Shaw's livery down at the end of the street," he gestured with a nod. "Tell him Armstrong sent you. He'll treat your mount right." Zara nodded her thanks and led her exhausted horse toward the livery, feeling the deputy's eyes on her back the entire way. She'd hoped to slip into town unnoticed, but in a place this small, that had been wishful thinking. 3 weeks on the run had taught her to be wary of lawmen, no matter how courteous. The livery owner, a gruff older man with hands like leather, took her mare without much conversation. When she mentioned Armstrong's name, he simply nodded and quoted a fair price. One small mercy in a day that had offered few. Back at the hotel, a tired-looking woman with graying hair took Zara's money without asking questions, another small blessing. The room was simple but clean, a narrow bed, washstand, and small window overlooking the dusty main street. Zara locked the door, then dragged the room's only chair beneath the handle for good measure before collapsing onto the bed. 600 miles from Boston, and still she couldn't outrun her past. The telegram had reached Tucson just as she was preparing to move on. All points bulletin, Zara Thomas, wanted for theft and murder, armed and dangerous, but they'd gotten it wrong. She wasn't a murderer, though she had blood on her hands all the same. And while she had stolen, it was only to reclaim what was rightfully hers. "What would Father think of me now?" she whispered to the empty room, her eyes burning with unshed tears. The respectable daughter of Judge William Thomas, reduced to a fugitive in a frontier town. The irony might have made her laugh if it weren't so painful. Sleep came in fitful bursts, her dreams haunted by the sound of gunfire and Charles Blackwood's face as he fell. The morning brought no respite from her troubles, but Zara had learned that staying in motion was safer than standing still. After a meager breakfast in the hotel dining room, she made her way to the general store. She needed supplies if she was to continue west, perhaps to California, where a woman might lose herself in one of the growing cities. The store was well stocked for a town this size, evidence that the nearby silver mines were bringing prosperity to Willow Creek. As she examined a display of canned goods, the bell above the door jingled, and Deputy Armstrong walked in. He nodded politely in her direction before approaching the counter, where the proprietor greeted him warmly. "Morning, Isaac. What can I help you with today?" "Morning, Ed. Just need some tobacco in those telegrams if they've come in." Zara kept her back to them, heart racing as she pretended to read labels. Telegrams meant information from outside, possibly about her. "Came in late yesterday," Ed said, reaching beneath the counter. "Nothing much happening in the territory, seems like." Isaac took the papers and glanced through them, his expression neutral, until he reached one near the bottom of the stack. His eyes flicked toward Zara, then back to the paper. "Appreciate it, Ed," he said, folding the telegrams and tucking them into his vest pocket. "Put it on the marshal's account." He turned and approached Zara, who braced herself for the confrontation. "Miss Thomas, isn't it?" he asked, his voice low enough that only she could hear. She nodded stiffly, one hand inching toward her hidden derringer. "Would you mind joining me for a cup of coffee at the hotel?" His tone made it clear this wasn't a request. "I believe we have some matters to discuss." "I don't think we have anything to discuss, Deputy." "I think we do." He gestured toward the door. "And I'd prefer to do it somewhere private rather than announce your business to the whole town." Trapped, Zara abandoned her shopping basket and followed him out. They walked in tense silence back to the hotel, where he led her to a corner table in the nearly empty dining room. Once seated with coffee before them, Isaac placed the telegram on the table between them, face down. "I received this description of a fugitive from Boston," he said calmly. "Woman in her 20s, green eyes, auburn hair, traveling alone. Wanted for theft and the murder of one Charles Blackwood, prominent businessman." Zara's fingers tightened around her coffee cup. And you matched the description, Miss Thomas, though I'm curious why a judge's daughter would turn to crime." Her eyes widened in surprise. "You know who I am?" "I can read," he said simply. "Judge William Thomas is mentioned prominently in the telegram. Seems he's offered a substantial reward for your capture." Bitterness welled up inside her. "Of course he has. Can't have a Thomas tarnishing the family name, can we?" Isaac studied her face, his expression unreadable. "Why don't you tell me your side of it?" "Why? So you can collect your reward more quickly. So I can understand what I'm dealing with." He leaned forward slightly. "In my experience, things are rarely as straightforward as a telegram makes them seem." Something in his tone made Zara hesitate. Perhaps it was the lack of judgment in his eyes, or simply her own desperate need to unburden herself to someone. Whatever the reason, the story spilled out of her like water from a broken dam. "Charles Blackwood was my father's protégé and my fiancé," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "The perfect match, according to my father. Blackwood had money, ambition, and connections. What he didn't have was scruples." Isaac remained silent, allowing her to continue. "My mother left me her jewelry when she died, family heirlooms, including a diamond pendant that had belonged to my grandmother. After we were engaged, Blackwood convinced me to let him store them in his bank vault for safekeeping." Her laugh was brittle. "When I discovered he'd been embezzling from his clients, including my father, I confronted him. He denied everything, of course. Then I learned he'd taken my jewelry as well, sold most of it to cover his losses." "And the murder?" Isaac asked quietly. Zara's eyes flashed with anger. "I went to his office to retrieve what was mine. We argued and he—" Her hand went unconsciously to her throat, where faint bruises were still visible beneath her high collar. "He tried to silence me permanently. There was a struggle. His pistol went off." She looked directly into Isaac's eyes. "I didn't murder him, Deputy, but I won't hang for defending myself, especially when no one would believe my word against the great Charles Blackwood's reputation. So you ran. I took what evidence I could of his crimes, and yes, I ran. My father would never have believed me. He thought Blackwood walked on water." Isaac was quiet for a long moment, weighing her words against his own sense of duty. Finally, he nodded slowly. "Evidence like this would need to be examined by proper authorities." Hope flickered briefly in Zara's eyes, only to be extinguished by his next words. "I'm bound by my oath to hold you until territorial authorities can sort this out." "They'll send me back to Boston," she said flatly, "and my father will ensure I hang before anyone examines any evidence." "I didn't say I was arresting you." Isaac's voice remained measured. "Not yet anyway, but I can't just ignore this telegram either." "What then?" "You stay in town while I send some inquiries of my own. No running." Zara's expression hardened. "And if I choose to leave, then I'd have to stop you," he said simply, "and neither of us would like that much." Their eyes locked in silent battle, neither willing to yield. Finally, Zara gave a curt nod. 3 days, she said. "Then I'm continuing west, with or without your permission." "Fair enough." Isaac stood, leaving the telegram on the table. I'll be watching, Miss Thomas. Don't make me regret this decision." As he walked away, Zara stared down at the telegram that held her fate in its terse lines. 3 days to convince a lawman she wasn't a murderer or to plan an escape from his watchful eye. Neither option seemed particularly promising. The next morning found Zara restless and confined, the small hotel room feeling more like a prison cell with each passing hour. She couldn't leave town, but staying inside would only draw more suspicion. Better to establish herself as just another traveler passing through. She dressed carefully in her least conspicuous outfit, a simple brown skirt and white shirtwaist, and headed downstairs. The hotel proprietress, Mrs. Holloway, was sweeping the small lobby. "Good morning," Zara offered politely. "Is there anywhere in town I might find employment for a few days? I find myself needing to replenish my funds." Mrs. Holloway leaned on her broom, sizing Zara up with shrewd eyes. "Depends on your skills, I suppose. Saloon's always looking for girls, but you don't seem the type." "I can read and write, keep accounts, and I'm handy with a needle," Zara replied, deliberately omitting her more genteel accomplishments. Doc Miller's nurse left last month to get married. He's been looking for someone to help organize his office and assist with patients. Nothing fancy, mind you, but it's respectable work." "That sounds perfect. Where might I find him?" "White building with the green trim, 2 doors down from the sheriff's office." Zara's enthusiasm dimmed slightly at the proximity to the law, but beggars couldn't be choosers. She thanked Mrs. Holloway and set out, the morning sun already beating down with unforgiving intensity. Dr. Miller turned out to be a harried-looking man in his 50s with kind eyes and a distracted manner. His office was in disarray, with papers stacked haphazardly and medical supplies scattered across multiple surfaces. "References?" he asked after she explained her purpose. "I'm afraid I'm traveling and didn't bring any with me," Zara admitted. "But I can demonstrate my abilities." He peered at her over wire-rimmed spectacles. "Can you read my writing?" He thrust a notebook toward her filled with nearly illegible scrawl. Zara studied it for a moment. "Patient Hiram Walker, complaints of chest pain and shortness of breath. Prescribed digitalis tincture, 5 drops twice daily. Rest advised." She looked up. "Shall I continue?" Dr. Miller's eyebrows rose. "That'll do. Most folks take one look and give up. Start by organizing these patient records alphabetically, then inventory the medicine cabinet. $2 a day, paid weekly. Can you start now?" "Yes, sir." Relief flooded through her. Not only would this provide much-needed funds, but a doctor's assistant had a perfect reason to stay in town temporarily. She was elbow-deep in dusty files when the door opened, bringing with it a blast of hot air and Deputy Armstrong. He paused in the doorway, surprise evident on his face. "Miss Thomas," he nodded. "I see you've found employment. As you said, Deputy, I'm staying in town for a few days. I might as well make myself useful." Dr. Miller emerged from the back room. "Isaac, just the man. How's that shoulder healing?" "Fine, Doc. Just drop by for some more of that salve." The doctor rummaged through a cabinet, producing a small tin. "Miss Thomas here is helping me get organized. Maybe next time I won't have to search for 5 minutes to find what I need." Isaac's eyes never left Zara. "That's fortunate for both of you," Dr. Miller chuckled. "Indeed it is. Now let me see that shoulder." Reluctantly, Isaac removed his jacket and rolled up his sleeve, revealing an angry red wound that looked to be a few weeks old. Zara watched as the doctor examined it, noticing the way the deputy winced despite his attempt to remain stoic. "Healing clean," Dr. Miller pronounced. "Keep using the salve and try not to pull those stitches again. Miss Thomas, hand me a fresh bandage from that drawer, would you?" Zara complied, their fingers brushing as she passed the bandage to the doctor. Something flickered in Isaac's eyes at the contact, surprise, perhaps, or something deeper. "How did it happen?" she asked, more to break the tension than out of genuine curiosity. "Disagreement with a cattle rustler," Isaac replied, watching as the doctor applied the salve. "He lost. The rustler's currently enjoying the territorial prison's hospitality," Dr. Miller added cheerfully. "Isaac here rode 15 miles with that bullet in his shoulder to bring him in." Despite herself, Zara was impressed. "That shows considerable determination, Deputy." "Or stubbornness," Isaac countered, rolling down his sleeve as the doctor finished. "Depends who you ask." "Well, I've always found that the line between determination and stubbornness is drawn by whether we approve of the goal," she said, returning to her filing. Isaac paid for his salve and headed for the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. "Dinner at the hotel at 6, Miss Thomas? I've made some inquiries I'd like to discuss." Her heart quickened. "I'll be there." After he left, Dr. Miller gave her a curious look. "Didn't realize you were acquainted with our deputy." "We met yesterday," Zara said carefully. "He's been kind enough to offer advice about the area." The doctor murmured, clearly not entirely convinced. "Isaac's a good man, one of the best I know, in fact. Whatever your business with him, you can trust his word." "I'll keep that in mind," Zara replied, turning back to her work and wondering if the doctor's assessment would hold true once Isaac's inquiries were complete. The afternoon passed quickly, the doctor's disorganized office providing plenty of distraction from her worries. By closing time, she'd made significant progress on the patient files and started an inventory of medical supplies. "You've done more in one day than my last assistant did in a week," Dr. Miller said approvingly. "Come back tomorrow if you're still in town." "I expect I will be," Zara replied, thinking of her agreement with the deputy. "Thank you for the opportunity." She returned to the hotel with enough time to wash away the dust and change into her one good dress, a deep blue that brought out the green in her eyes. The garment was wrinkled from being packed in her saddlebags, but it was the best she could manage. Isaac was already waiting in the dining room, looking somewhat uncomfortable in a clean shirt and vest, his usual hat absent. He stood as she approached, pulling out her chair with unexpected gallantry. "You clean up nice, Deputy," she observed as she took her seat. "So do you, Miss Thomas," he returned, a hint of a smile softening his features. "Though I suspect that dress has seen better days." "Saddlebags aren't kind to fine fabrics," she agreed. "But I didn't come west for a fashion parade." A waitress approached with plates of beef stew and cornbread, setting them down before retreating. They ate in silence for a few minutes before Isaac spoke. "I sent some telegrams this morning," he said, keeping his voice low. "Called in a few favors from my time with the U.S. Marshals." Zara set down her spoon, appetite suddenly gone. And it seems Charles Blackwood wasn't the upstanding citizen everyone believed him to be." Isaac leaned forward slightly. "There have been whispers about missing client funds for months, though nothing could be proven." Hope blossomed in her chest. "You believe me, then?" "I believe there's more to the story than what's in that wanted poster," he said cautiously. "But that doesn't change the fact that Blackwood is dead and you fled the scene." "What would you have done?" she challenged. "Stayed to be hanged for defending myself?" Isaac's expression remained neutral. "I'd have faced the consequences of my actions and trusted in the law." "Easy to say when the law has always been on your side." Bitterness crept into her voice. "My father is the law in Boston, Deputy, and he made it very clear where his loyalties lay." "With Blackwood," Isaac surmised. "With his own reputation and ambitions," Zara corrected. "Blackwood was his ticket to the governor's inner circle. My accusations would have been inconvenient." Isaac considered this, taking a bite of cornbread before responding. "I need to see this evidence you mentioned." She hesitated. Years of caution warring with the desperate need for someone to believe her. "And if I show you, what then?" "Then I make a decision about what kind of lawman I want to be." His eyes, steady and honest, held hers. "I took an oath to uphold justice, Miss Thomas, not just the letter of the law." Something in his gaze made her believe him, despite all the reasons she shouldn't trust a man with a badge. Without a word, she stood and headed toward the stairs. After a moment's hesitation, Isaac followed. At her door, she paused. "People will talk if you come into my room, Deputy." "People always talk in small towns," he replied pragmatically. "Better your reputation than your life." Inside the room, Zara knelt beside the bed and pulled out her saddlebags. From a hidden compartment, she extracted a small leather portfolio. These are copies of ledger entries I found in Blackwood's desk, she explained, handing him several pages of numbers. He was keeping 2 sets of books, one for the bank examiners, one for himself. He'd been siphoning money from client accounts for years, including my father's. Isaac examined the papers with a practiced eye. This is damning, but it's also circumstantial without the original ledgers. There's more. She pulled out several letters. These are from my mother's lawyer, confirming which pieces of jewelry were legally mine through inheritance, and these, she produced pawn tickets and sales receipts, show Blackwood selling those same pieces over the past 6 months. Isaac whistled softly. He was systematically liquidating your inheritance. To cover his embezzlement, Zara confirmed. When I confronted him, he claimed everything was in my name anyway, since we were to be married. Said it shouldn't matter to me if he borrowed as few items to cover temporary shortfalls. And when you disagreed, her hand went to her throat again, an unconscious gesture. He showed his true nature, said no one would believe me over him, especially not my father. Then she swallowed hard. He tried to make sure I couldn't tell anyone. Isaac's eyes darkened as he noticed the faded bruises her high collar had previously hidden. Without thinking, he reached out, his fingers hovering just above the marks before he caught himself and withdrew his hand. The gun was his, she continued quietly. It fell during the struggle. I just wanted to get away, but he came at me again. The gun went off. Her voice caught. I never meant to kill him. I just wanted what was mine and to be free of him. Isaac was silent for a long moment, reviewing the documents spread across the bed. Finally, he gathered them carefully and handed them back to her. Put these somewhere safe, he said. I need to think. That's all? Frustration colored her words. You said you'd make a decision. And I will, he responded, his voice level despite the conflict evident in his eyes. But not tonight. This isn't simple, Miss Thomas. Zara, she corrected automatically. If you're going to decide my fate, you might as well use my name. He nodded slowly. Zara, then. And I'm Isaac, not Deputy, all the time. The use of her given name in his deep voice sent an unexpected shiver through her. What happens now, Isaac? Now, you continue working for Doc Miller tomorrow. Stay in town. I'll have an answer for you by the end of your 3 days. He moved toward the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. For what it's worth, I believe you killed in self-defense. The question is whether I can prove it to anyone else. After he left, Zara sat on the edge of the bed, emotions warring within her. For the first time since that terrible night in Boston, someone believed her. Whether that belief would be enough to save her remained to be seen. The following day passed in a blur of activity at the doctor's office. A mining accident in the morning brought in 3 injured men, keeping both Dr. Miller and Zara busy until well past noon. She found herself grateful for the distraction, her hands steady as she assisted with bandaging and minor procedures. You've done this before, the doctor observed as she efficiently cleaned and dressed a minor laceration. My mother volunteered with the poor in Boston, she explained, not mentioning that she had been expected to do the same as part of her charitable duties as a judge's daughter. I learned some basic medical skills there. Well, you're a natural. Ever consider nursing as a profession? The question caught her off guard. A profession had never been part of the future mapped out for her. I haven't had the luxury of making such plans recently, she admitted. Dr. Miller looked thoughtful but didn't press further. As the day wound down and the last patient departed, he cleared his throat. Miss Thomas, I don't know what trouble you're in and don't bother denying it. I've been around long enough to recognize someone on the run, but if you're inclined to stay in Willow Creek, I could use someone with your abilities on a permanent basis. Zara stared at him in surprise. Dr. Miller, just consider it, he interrupted gently. Whatever your past, this town is more concerned with who you are now than who you were before you arrived. It's one of the benefits of the frontier. His kindness threatened to undo her careful composure. Thank you, she managed. I'll keep that in mind. As she left the office, lost in thought, she nearly collided with Isaac, who was approaching from the direction of the telegraph office. Sorry, she apologized, stepping back quickly. I wasn't watching where I was going. No harm done. His expression was unreadable. I was coming to find you. Walk with me? They fell into step together, heading toward the edge of town where fewer people would overhear their conversation. I received some responses to my inquiries, Isaac said without preamble. Your father has indeed offered a substantial reward for your return, $5,000 to be precise. Zara's stomach clenched. That's a fortune out here. Yes, it is. His tone revealed nothing of his thoughts. He's also dispatched Pinkerton detectives to track you. They're currently following your trail from Tucson. Cold fear washed over her. How long do I have? A few days, maybe less. Isaac stopped walking, turning to face her directly. There's also news about Blackwood's business affairs. Seems the bank examiners finally discovered discrepancies in the books after his death. Several clients have filed complaints about missing funds. Hope flickered tentatively. So there's proof he was embezzling? There's evidence, Isaac corrected. Whether it's enough to corroborate your story is another matter. The problem remains that you fled the scene of his death instead of reporting it. You know why I couldn't stay, she countered, frustration rising. What would you have me do now? Wait here to be dragged back to Boston in chains? Isaac's expression softened slightly. I didn't say that. Then what are you saying? The question hung between them, laden with implications neither was ready to voice. Before he could answer, shouts erupted from the direction of the bank. Both turned to see people running, and in the distance, the unmistakable sound of gunfire. Isaac's demeanor changed instantly. The lawman replacing the man. Stay here, he ordered, already drawing his pistol and running toward the commotion. Zara hesitated only briefly before following, keeping to the edges of the street. As she approached, she could see 3 men on horseback outside the bank, bandanas covering their faces. 2 more emerged from the building, carrying canvas bags. Drop the money and your weapons! Isaac's voice rang out as he took cover behind a water trough, his gun trained on the robbers. Instead of complying, one of the men opened fire, the bullet splintering the wood mere inches from Isaac's head. The deputy returned fire, hitting one of the mounted men, who slumped forward but remained in the saddle. Chaos erupted as the bandits attempted to mount their horses, firing wildly into the street. Townspeople scattered, seeking shelter from the flying bullets. Zara pressed herself against the side of the general store, heart pounding as she watched the gunfight unfold. Isaac was outnumbered, with no sign of the sheriff or other deputies. Despite this, he held his ground, his shooting precise and controlled. He managed to wound another bandit before a bullet caught him in the side, sending him stumbling backward. Without conscious thought, Zara pulled her derringer from its hidden pocket and ran forward. The remaining bandits were focused on their escape, hurriedly mounting their horses with the stolen money. One noticed Isaac struggling to regain his footing and raised his pistol for a killing shot. Zara fired first. Her small pistol wasn't designed for distance or accuracy, but at that range, it didn't matter. The bandit cried out, clutching his arm as his gun fell to the dust. The distraction was enough for Isaac to recover and fire again, hitting the man squarely in the chest. The remaining robbers spurred their horses, fleeing down the main street with their wounded companion and most of the money. Gunfire followed them from several buildings where armed townspeople had taken cover. Zara rushed to Isaac's side, where he leaned heavily against the water trough, one hand pressed to the spreading bloodstain on his shirt. I told you to stay back, he ground out through clenched teeth. You're welcome for saving your life, she retorted, examining the wound. Can you walk? We need to get you to Dr. Miller. He nodded grimly, allowing her to help him to his feet. With her shoulder under his arm, they made their way slowly toward the doctor's office, leaving behind the chaos as townspeople emerged to assess the damage. That was either very brave or very foolish, Isaac said as they struggled along. I've been called worse things than foolish, Zara replied, straining under his weight. Besides, I couldn't just watch you die. He looked down at her, something unidentifiable flashing in his eyes. Why not? Might have solved your problems. I don't solve my problems by letting good men die, she said sharply, even inconvenient lawmen. A ghost of a smile touched his lips despite the pain. Noted. Dr. Miller met them at the door of his office, alerted by the gunfire. Not again, Isaac, he sighed, helping Zara guide the deputy to the examination table. Let me guess you decided one bullet hole wasn't enough? Bank robbery, Isaac explained tersely as the doctor cut away his blood-soaked shirt. Did they get away? Focus on yourself for once, Zara admonished, bringing clean water and bandages without being asked. The money isn't worth your life. Dr. Miller examined the wound carefully. Bullet went through clean. You're lucky missed anything vital. Going to hurt like hell for a while, though. Isaac grimaced as the doctor began cleaning the wound. Wouldn't be the first time. No, but it might be the last if you don't start being more careful, the doctor scolded. Miss Thomas, hand me that bottle of whiskey. For disinfecting, he added, though the patient might appreciate a swig first. Zara complied, watching as Isaac took a long pull from the bottle before the doctor poured some over the wound. His jaw clenched, but he made no sound beyond a sharp intake of breath. Miss Thomas, I need to step out for supplies from the back room. Keep pressure on this bandage, Dr. Miller instructed before disappearing through a door. Alone with Isaac, Zara pressed firmly on the bandage, acutely aware of the warmth of his skin beneath her fingers. Thank you, he said quietly, for what you did back there. Anyone would have done the same. No, he disagreed. Most people run from gunfire, not toward it, especially not people already in trouble with the law. She met his gaze steadily. Perhaps I'm not most people. No, he agreed, his voice softer. You certainly aren't. Something shifted between them in that moment, something neither was prepared to name but both felt with startling clarity. Dr. Miller returned, breaking the tension as he set to work properly bandaging Isaac's wound. You'll need to rest for at least a week, he declared, ignoring the deputy's protests. No arguments. Miss Thomas, can I trust you to see him home and make sure he follows orders? Of course, she agreed, though the prospect of being alone with Isaac in his home sent an unexpected flutter through her stomach. Once the doctor finished his work, Zara helped Isaac to his feet again. He leaned on her less heavily now, the initial shock of the injury having passed, but still kept his arm across her shoulders. I live above the gunsmith's shop, he directed as they stepped outside. Not far. The walk was short, but drew curious looks from townspeople who had emerged after the excitement of the robbery. Zara could hear the whispers following them, speculations about who she was and why she was helping the wounded deputy. Isaac's quarters were sparse, but neat, a single room with a bed, table, 2 chairs, and a small stove. A trunk at the foot of the bed and a bookshelf with a surprising number of volumes provided the only personal touches. Sit before you fall, Zara ordered, guiding him to the edge of the bed. Where do you keep your spare shirts? He nodded toward the trunk. Bottom drawer. She found a clean shirt and helped him change, trying to maintain a professional demeanor despite the intimacy of the situation. The fresh bandage Dr. Miller had applied stood out starkly against his tanned skin, a reminder of how close he had come to a more serious injury. You should rest, she said, stepping back once he was dressed. Doctor's orders. I've had worse, he insisted, though he made no move to stand. Besides, we haven't finished our conversation. Zara sank into one of the chairs, suddenly exhausted as the events of the day caught up with her. About my future, you mean? Yes. Isaac's expression grew serious. Things have changed, Zara. Because I helped you. She shook her head. I don't want your gratitude if it comes at the expense of your principles. It's not about gratitude, he countered. It's about seeing clearly who you are when the chips are down. You could have run during the confusion. Instead, you risked your life to save mine. That doesn't change what happened in Boston. No, but it confirms what I already suspected. You're not a cold-blooded killer. He shifted, wincing as the movement pulled at his wound. I believe your account of Blackwood's death. I believe it was self-defense. Relief washed over her, so intense she felt lightheaded. Thank you, she whispered. You don't know what that means. I'm not finished, he cautioned. Believing you and proving your innocence are 2 different matters. The Pinkertons will be here soon, and they won't care about my opinion. So I should keep running, she concluded, disappointment replacing her momentary relief. Not necessarily. Isaac's eyes held a determined gleam. I've been thinking about this since last night. There might be another way. What do you mean? I know a judge in Prescott, an honest man who believes in justice, not just the letter of the law. If we can get your evidence to him, have him examine it, and take your testimony before the Pinkertons arrive, it might create enough doubt to force a proper investigation rather than a summary extradition. Hope stirred within her. Would he really listen to a woman accused of murder over a respected businessman and a judge? Judge Collins has no love for the Eastern establishment, Isaac said with a slight smile, and he owes me a favor for bringing in the Ross gang last year. Zara considered this, turning the possibility over in her mind. Prescott is at least 2 days' ride from here. Yes, and in my current condition, I'd slow us down even more, Isaac admitted. But there's another option. Judge Collins is due in Silver Springs the day after tomorrow for circuit court. It's only half a day's ride. Us? Zara caught the word immediately. You're proposing to come with me? You didn't think I was suggesting you go alone, did you? You're still technically in my custody. She raised an eyebrow. Am I? I don't recall being arrested. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Let's call it protective custody then. I may believe you, but I'm still a lawman. I can't just let you ride off alone. And what about your duty here? The sheriff bowed. We'll understand when I explain, Isaac finished. Besides, after today's excitement, he'll be back from the line cabin where he's been tracking those rustlers. I'm not abandoning my post, I'm pursuing justice. Zara studied him, searching for any sign of deception or ulterior motive. Finding none, she asked the question that had been nagging at her since he first suggested helping her. Why are you doing this, Isaac? Why risk your career, your reputation, for someone you barely know? He was quiet for a moment, his eyes never leaving hers. Because I've spent my life upholding the law, believing in its power to protect the innocent and punish the guilty. If I turn my back when that system fails, someone like you, someone who's already been betrayed by the people who should have protected her, then what am I really fighting for? His words resonated with an honesty that touched something deep within her, a part of her that had begun to believe justice was merely a convenient fiction. All right, she agreed softly. We'll try it your way. When do we leave? First light tomorrow, Isaac decided. The sooner we reach Judge Collins, the better. As she stood to leave, he caught her hand. Zara. Her name was almost a caress on his lips. Thank you for today. Not many would have done what you did. Perhaps I'm simply not ready to have your death on my conscience along with Blackwood's, she replied, attempting lightness despite the warmth of his hand around hers. Is that all it was? His gaze was too perceptive, seeing too much of what she wasn't ready to acknowledge. She gently withdrew her hand. Rest, Deputy. Tomorrow will be a long day for both of us. Outside his room, Zara leaned against the wall, taking a deep breath to steady herself. She'd come to Willow Creek expecting to find nothing but another temporary hiding place. Instead, she had found something far more dangerous, a man who made her believe in possibilities she had long since abandoned. Dawn broke in a riot of orange and pink as Zara finished saddling her mare outside the livery. She had risen before first light, gathering the few possessions she had unpacked and leaving a note for Dr. Miller, thanking him for the opportunity and apologizing for her abrupt departure. The sound of hoofbeats made her turn to see Isaac approaching, his expression grim despite the beautiful sunrise. She noted with concern that he rode stiffly, his injured side clearly causing him pain despite his attempts to hide it. You should be resting, she said by way of greeting. And you should be less concerned with my well-being and more with your own, he countered, though there was no real heat in his words. Are you ready? She nodded, securing her saddlebags. Did you speak with the sheriff? He returned late last night. Wasn't happy about me leaving, but he understood the situation. Isaac adjusted his hat, squinting toward the eastern horizon. We should make Silver Springs by mid-afternoon if we keep a steady pace. They rode out of town as the first businesses were opening, drawing curious glances from early risers. Zara felt a surprising pang of regret as Willow Creek disappeared behind them. In another life, under different circumstances, it might have been a place she could have called home. The trail to Silver Springs wound through rugged country, rocky outcroppings and scrubby vegetation, stretching as far as the eye could see, punctuated occasionally by stunted juniper and pinyon pines. Despite the barren landscape, Zara found a stark beauty in its vastness, so different from the manicured gardens and crowded streets of Boston. They rode mostly in silence, Isaac clearly conserving his strength, and Zara lost in thoughts of what lay ahead. What would Judge Collins make of her story? Would he believe her, as Isaac did, or would he see only a fugitive attempting to escape justice? Around midday, they stopped in the shade of a large boulder to rest the horses and eat the simple provisions Isaac had packed: jerky, hard biscuits, and dried fruit. "How's your side?" Zara asked as Isaac lowered himself carefully to sit on a flat rock. "It's been better," he admitted with a wry smile. "But I'll manage." She studied him with concern. "You're pale. Let me check the bandage." Before he could protest, she moved to kneel beside him, fingers gently lifting his shirt to reveal the bandage beneath. A small spot of blood had seeped through, but the wound didn't appear to be actively bleeding. "It's not too bad," she concluded, aware suddenly of how close they were, of the warmth of his skin beneath her fingertips. "But we should change the bandage when we reach Silver Springs." "Dr. Miller taught you well," Isaac observed, making no move to pull away from her touch. "I told you. I helped with the poor in Boston," she reminded him. "Gunshot wounds aren't common there, but injuries are universal." Their eyes met, and for a moment, the desert around them seemed to disappear. Then Isaac cleared his throat and shifted away slightly. "We should keep moving," he said, his voice rougher than before. "Still have a ways to go." They continued their journey, the sun beating down mercilessly as morning gave way to afternoon. Zara noticed Isaac's increasing discomfort, though he said nothing. By the time Silver Springs appeared on the horizon, a cluster of buildings nestled in a shallow valley, his face was drawn with pain, and he rode hunched slightly to protect his injured side. "There it is," he said, nodding toward the town. "Smaller than Willow Creek, but they've got a decent hotel where Judge Collins usually stays when he's holding court here." "And a doctor?" Zara asked pointedly. Isaac's lips twitched in a ghost of a smile. "Worried about me, Miss Thomas?" "Someone has to be, since you clearly aren't," she retorted. "You've reopened that wound, haven't you?" "It's possible," he conceded, "but the judge is more important right now. We can see to my side after we speak with him." Zara bit back her frustration at his stubbornness. "Fine, but I'm checking that bandage the minute we've secured rooms at the hotel." Silver Springs proved to be a quieter town than Willow Creek, with fewer businesses but a surprisingly large courthouse dominating the main street. The hotel was a two-story wooden structure with a wide porch, where several men in suits sat smoking and discussing what appeared to be legal matters. "Lawyers," Isaac explained as they dismounted in front of the building. "Circuit Court brings them out like flies." Inside, the hotel clerk informed them that Judge Collins had indeed arrived and was preparing for tomorrow's session. "2 rooms, please," Isaac requested, placing money on the counter. "And could you send word to the judge that Deputy Marshal Armstrong needs to speak with him on an urgent matter?" "Of course, Deputy," the clerk replied, eyeing Zara curiously. "Will the lady be joining you?" "Yes," Isaac answered firmly. "It concerns both of us." They were shown to adjoining rooms on the second floor, simple but clean accommodations that felt luxurious after hours in the saddle. "Rest," Zara instructed as Isaac entered his room. "I'll be over to check that wound in 15 minutes, and I expect you to be sitting down with your shirt off." He raised an eyebrow at her authoritative tone, but didn't argue, closing the door between their rooms. Alone, Zara quickly washed away the dust of the trail and changed into her blue dress, still wrinkled, but the best option for making a favorable impression on the judge. She repinned her hair, wishing for a proper mirror instead of the small, spotted one provided by the hotel. When she knocked on the connecting door, Isaac's voice bade her enter. True to her instructions, he was seated on the edge of the bed, shirt removed and bandage exposed. The bloodstain had grown, confirming her suspicion that the wound had reopened during their ride. "I brought fresh bandages from Dr. Miller's office," she said, approaching with her small medical kit. "This is going to hurt." "Not my first time," he reminded her as she carefully peeled away the soiled bandage. The wound beneath looked angry and raw, but not infected. Zara cleaned it gently, aware of Isaac's sharp intake of breath despite his attempt to remain stoic. "You're lucky," she commented as she applied a fresh bandage. "A little deeper, and you might have done serious damage." "I've been told I have a guardian angel," he replied, his voice light despite the pain she knew he must be feeling. "You need more than an angel," she countered. "You need common sense." He chuckled, then winced as the movement pulled at his wound. "Perhaps, but common sense would have told me to hand you over to the authorities, and then where would we be?" Zara's hand stilled on the bandage. "Why didn't you?" she asked quietly. "From the beginning, why take the risk?" Isaac was silent for a moment, his eyes searching hers. "I've spent my life believing in justice, not just law. Sometimes they aren't the same thing." "That's not a complete answer," she pressed. "No," he agreed, "it's not." But he offered nothing more, and before she could insist, a knock at the hallway door interrupted them. "That'll be the message from Judge Collins," Isaac said, reaching for his shirt. The hotel clerk informed them that the judge would see them in the hotel's private dining room in 1 hour. This gave Zara time to gather her evidence and for Isaac to make himself presentable despite his injury. When they descended to the dining room, Judge Collins was already waiting, a tall, imposing man with iron gray hair and shrewd eyes that seemed to evaluate everything they encountered. He rose as they entered, shaking Isaac's hand warmly. "Armstrong," he greeted. "When they said you were here, I assumed it was about that bank robbery in Willow Creek. News travels fast in these parts." "It's related, sir, but not directly," Isaac replied. "May I present Miss Zara Thomas?" The judge's eyebrows rose slightly as he took Zara's offered hand. "Thomas? Any relation to Judge William Thomas of Boston?" "His daughter," Zara confirmed, her heart sinking at the immediate recognition. Judge Collins gestured for them to sit. "I've met your father at judicial conferences. Formidable man." "Yes, he is," Zara agreed cautiously. Isaac cleared his throat. "Judge Collins, Miss Thomas is in a difficult situation, one that requires discretion and a fair hearing." "I gathered as much when a deputy marshal requested an urgent private meeting with a woman not his wife," the judge replied dryly. "What's this about, Armstrong?" Over the next hour, Zara told her story from her engagement to Blackwood, to the discovery of his embezzlement, to the fatal confrontation in his office. She presented her evidence methodically, as Isaac had advised, keeping emotion from her voice as much as possible. Judge Collins listened without interruption, examining each document with careful attention. When she finished, he sat back, studying her with those penetrating eyes. "You're aware, Miss Thomas, that there's a substantial reward for your capture," he said finally. $5,000 would tempt many in these parts to look the other way regarding the circumstances of Mr. Blackwood's death. "I'm aware," Zara replied, meeting his gaze steadily. "I'm not asking for special treatment, Your Honor, only a fair investigation into the truth." "And you, Armstrong?" The judge turned to Isaac. "What's your stake in this? $5,000 would set a man up nicely." "I believe in justice, sir," Isaac answered simply. "Miss Thomas deserves that much." Judge Collins drummed his fingers on the table, deep in thought. Finally he nodded once, decisively. "Here's what I can do," he said, leaning forward. "I'll take your formal deposition tonight, Miss Thomas, under oath. I'll examine these documents and authenticate them as best I can. Then I'll write to the district attorney in Boston requesting a full investigation before any extradition proceedings." Relief flooded through Zara, tempered by caution. "And until then?" "Until then, you remain in Deputy Armstrong's custody," the judge ruled. Not under arrest, but not free to leave the territory either. A compromise that should satisfy the letter of the law while allowing us to pursue the truth. Isaac nodded. Thank you, Your Honor. Don't thank me yet, Judge Collins cautioned. This won't be simple or quick. Your father has considerable influence, Miss Thomas, and Mr. Blackwood's associates will want his death avenged, not investigated. I understand, Zara said quietly, but it's more hope than I had a week ago. The judge's expression softened slightly. Sometimes that's all we can ask for in this life, a little more hope than we had before. The deposition took several hours, with Judge Collins's clerk recording every word as Zara recounted her story in exacting detail. Isaac remained present throughout, his steady presence a comfort as she relived the most traumatic moments of her life. By the time they finished, it was well past midnight. Exhausted both physically and emotionally, Zara barely remembered the walk back to her room, Isaac's hand supportive at her elbow. At her door, she paused. What happens now? Now you get some rest, he said gently. Tomorrow, we return to Willow Creek and wait for the judge's inquiries to bear fruit. And the Pinkertons? We'll be looking for a woman traveling alone, not a deputy marshal, and his... He hesitated, searching for the right word. Prisoner? She suggested with a wry smile. Assistant, he corrected. Dr. Miller mentioned he offered you a position. It would provide a good cover while we wait. The thought of returning to Willow Creek, of having purpose and place, even temporarily, filled her with unexpected warmth. You think it could work? I think it's our best option, Isaac replied. Judge Collins will send word when he has news. She nodded, suddenly acutely aware of how close they were standing in the dimly lit hallway. Thank you, she said softly, for believing me when no one else would. Zara. His voice was rough with emotion he seemed reluctant to name. Before either could say more, the sound of boots on the stairs broke the moment. Isaac stepped back, his expression closing off, as two men appeared at the end of the hallway. Good night, Miss Thomas, he said formally. We'll depart after breakfast. Inside her room, Zara leaned against the door, heart racing from what had almost happened. Whatever was growing between them was complicated by circumstances. Neither could control her precarious legal situation, his position as a lawman, the uncertain future that awaited them both. Yet despite all the reasons to guard her heart, she found herself drawn to the quiet strength of the man who had risked everything to help her. A dangerous feeling, perhaps, but one she was increasingly powerless to resist. The journey back to Willow Creek the following day was considerably more relaxed than their outbound trip had been. Judge Collins's intervention had provided a measure of security Zara hadn't felt since fleeing Boston, and Isaac seemed more at ease as well, despite the continuing discomfort from his wound. They arrived in town late in the afternoon to find it still buzzing with talk of the bank robbery. Sheriff Taggart greeted them with obvious relief when they stopped at the office to report their return. Glad to have you back, Armstrong, the older man said gruffly. Got 2 of those bank robbers in custody. The wounded ones couldn't make it far. Other 3 are still out there. Any leads? Isaac asked, settling carefully into a chair. Heading south, last we heard. Got a posse tracking them. The sheriff's eyes shifted to Zara, curiosity evident. Miss Thomas, right? Heard you showed some grit during the robbery. I did what anyone would have done, she demurred. Not anyone, the sheriff corrected. Doc Miller's been asking after you. Said his office has gone to hell in a handbasket since you left. Isaac smiled slightly. Miss Thomas will be staying in Willow Creek for the foreseeable future. Judge Collins' orders. The sheriff raised an eyebrow, but didn't question further. Well then, welcome to town officially. Dr. Miller was equally pleased to see her when she presented herself at his office the following morning, accepting his job offer with genuine gratitude. The work was demanding but satisfying, giving her purpose beyond simply waiting for news from Judge Collins. Days stretched into weeks, and gradually, Zara found herself becoming part of the fabric of Willow Creek. Patients greeted her by name, shopkeepers saved items they thought she might need, and Mrs. Holloway at the hotel began treating her more like a permanent resident than a transient guest. Throughout it all, Isaac remained a constant presence, checking on her daily, sharing meals, accompanying her to church on Sundays. Neither spoke openly of the connection growing between them, both aware of the uncertainties that still shadowed Zara's future. Then, one evening in late October, as they walked back from dinner at the hotel, Isaac broke their unspoken agreement to avoid discussing personal matters. "Dr. Miller says you've transformed his practice," he commented as they strolled along the moonlit street. "Says he's never been so organized or had so many female patients." Zara smiled, pleased by the praise. Women feel more comfortable with another woman present, and organization was always my strength, even in Boston. "You've made a place for yourself here," Isaac observed. "People respect you." "For now," she agreed, her smile fading, "until the Pinkertons find me, or Judge Collins's inquiries lead nowhere." Isaac stopped walking, turning to face her in the pool of light cast by a street lamp. "What if they don't? What if you could stay in Willow Creek?" The question held layers of meaning she wasn't sure she was ready to explore. "Isaac, just consider it," he pressed gently. "This town could be your home, Zara. These people already care about you." "And you?" The question escaped before she could reconsider. "Do you care, Deputy?" His expression softened, vulnerability replacing his usual reserve. "You know I do. More than is wise given the circumstances." The admission hung between them, charged with possibilities neither had dared acknowledge openly until now. "We can't build anything on uncertainty," Zara said finally, though it cost her to do so. "Not while my future remains in question." "Then we'll keep waiting," Isaac replied, resignation and determination mingling in his voice. "For as long as it takes." The breakthrough came unexpectedly in early November with the arrival of a telegram from Judge Collins. Isaac found Zara at the doctor's office, his expression unreadable as he handed her the folded paper. "Just came in," he said simply, "for both of us." With trembling fingers, Zara unfolded the telegram and read aloud. "Investigation in Boston confirms embezzlement. Blackwood Associates implicated. Stop. Judge Thomas recused himself due to conflict. Stop. New evidence suggests self-defense. Stop. Charges being reconsidered. Stop. Remain where you are. Details to follow. Collins." She looked up at Isaac, hardly daring to believe the words. "Is this real?" "It's real," he confirmed, a smile breaking across his face. "Judge Collins wouldn't say it if it weren't true." "But how?" Disbelief warred with hope. "My father would never have allowed." "Even your father can't stop a federal investigation once it's begun," Isaac pointed out, "and it sounds like he's been forced to step aside." The possibility of freedom, real freedom, not the temporary reprieve she'd been living under, was almost too much to comprehend. Tears welled in her eyes, and without thinking, she threw her arms around Isaac's neck. He held her close, unconcerned with who might see them. "It's going to be all right," he murmured into her hair. "You're going to be all right." When she pulled back, wiping away tears, she found him watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," he said deliberately, "we wait for the final word from Judge Collins. And then—" "And then?" she prompted when he hesitated. Isaac took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. "And then, if you're willing, we might discuss your permanent place in Willow Creek. And in my life." The full meaning of his words registered, bringing a flush to her cheeks. "Are you proposing something, Deputy Armstrong?" "Not yet," he replied with a small smile. "But I'm considering it, when the time is right." The final confirmation arrived 2 weeks later, a formal letter from the district attorney in Boston stating that all charges against Zara had been dropped in light of new evidence. Charles Blackwood's death had been ruled justifiable homicide and self-defense, and his business associates were now facing charges for their roles in the embezzlement scheme. There was also a personal note from her father, stiff and formal, but acknowledging that he had been wrong about Blackwood and asking, in his reserved way, for her forgiveness. "Will you go back?" Isaac asked as they sat on the hotel's porch that evening, the letter lying between them on the small table. "To Boston, I mean. To reconcile with your father." Zara considered the question seriously. Perhaps someday, for a visit, but not to stay. She looked out at the town that had become her home in so many ways. "There's nothing for me there anymore." "And here?" Isaac's voice was careful, measured, betraying nothing of his own hopes. She turned to him, finding the courage to speak the truth that had been growing in her heart. "Here, there's everything. Purpose, respect." She paused, meeting his gaze directly. "Love." The word hung between them, charged with meaning neither could mistake. "I was going to wait," Isaac said finally. "Do this properly, with a ring and all the traditional trappings." "When have we ever done anything the traditional way?" Zara countered with a soft smile. He laughed, the sound rich and warm in the cool evening air. "Fair point." His expression grew serious as he took her hand. "I love you, Zara. I think I have since that day you fired your derringer to save my life, even when you had every reason to let me fall." "I loved you before that," she admitted. "When you believed me without proof, when you risked everything to help a woman you barely knew." Isaac's thumb traced gentle circles on the back of her hand. "I'm not a wealthy man. All I can offer is a lawman's salary and a life that sometimes involves danger." "I've had wealth," Zara replied. "I've had position and privilege. They're poor substitutes for honest love and true partnership." He smiled, bringing her hand to his lips. "Is that a yes, then? To a future together?" "It's a yes," she confirmed, joy bubbling up inside her. "To everything." The news of their engagement spread through Willow Creek with the speed only small towns can manage. Dr. Miller offered his heartfelt congratulations, along with a generous wedding gift partnership in his practice for Zara, ensuring her professional future, regardless of what paths lay ahead. They were married in the town's small church on Christmas Eve, 1878, with Judge Collins himself traveling from Prescott to officiate. The entire town turned out for the celebration, from the sheriff to the livery stable boy, all having played some part in the unlikely love story of the fugitive and the lawman. As they stood together before the altar, Zara in a simple white dress Mrs. Holloway had helped her make, Isaac remembered the words that had first revealed the depth of her character to him. "They'll call me a sinner," she had said that night in her hotel room, chin raised defiantly as she recounted her flight from Boston. "Then I'll be the one standing beside you," he had replied, not fully understanding then how prophetic those words would be. Now, as they spoke their vows before God and the community that had embraced them both, those words echoed in his heart, a promise fulfilled, a journey completed, a love hard won against all odds. The reception lasted well into the night, the town hall decorated with evergreens and candles for the occasion. As Isaac led his bride in their first dance, he bent to whisper in her ear, "Regrets, Mrs. Armstrong?" Zara looked up at him, her eyes shining with a happiness she had once thought forever beyond her reach. "Not a single one." In the years that followed, Willow Creek grew and prospered, as did the Armstrongs. Isaac eventually became sheriff when Taggart retired, while Zara continued her work with Dr. Miller, eventually taking over the practice when the old doctor's eyesight failed him. Their first child, a daughter, arrived in the autumn of 1880, followed by twin boys 2 years later. The house they built on the edge of town rang with laughter and love, a testament to the second chances they had given each other. Sometimes, on quiet evenings when the children were asleep, they would sit on their porch and marvel at the journey that had brought them together, a desperate flight, a courageous stand, and the simple, profound power of belief. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't come to Willow Creek?" Zara asked on one such evening, her head resting on Isaac's shoulder as they watched the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. "No," he replied, drawing her closer, "because somehow I think we would have found each other anyway." Such faith, she teased gently. Not faith, he corrected. Experience. Some things are simply meant to be, against all odds and reason. As the last light faded from the western horizon, Zara Armstrong looked at the life she had built from the ashes of her old one. A husband who loved her for her strength as well as her softness, children who would grow up knowing both justice and mercy, a community that had become family in all the ways that mattered. They had both been tested, both been broken in different ways, and yet together they had found wholeness. Whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, they would face them as they had faced all others side by side, their love a sanctuary neither had dared hope for, but both had found against all odds, in a dusty frontier town called Willow Creek,